What's up in my headphones, Charles?
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because today we are talking about one of the biggest series in fantasy, both in terms of popularity and number of books. That is the Wheel of Time.
By Robert Jordan.
By Robert Jordan, yes. And we recently finished Book 3, The Dragon Reborn, taking a brief hiatus to bring in some other books onto the show, and we will be back with Book 4 very soon. So while we're waiting, we just still want to keep talking about Wheel of Time.
That we do, and because we will be talking about the first 3 books of the Wheel of Time, if you haven't yet read up to Book 3, The Dragon Reborn, then now might be a good time to turn this down in your headphones, because we will not be holding back from spoilers up through Book 3. I haven't read past Book 3, so we will not be spoiling past that, or at least I can guarantee I won't.
And I'll do my best.
Right, and Charles won't either, right?
Of course.
But if you have not yet read those first 3 books of The Wheel of Time, we are really enjoying this epic adventure, so we highly recommend that you check those out if you're ready for, it's an investment and all that, and that's why we have an episode giving first-time tips from #Twitter of Time that you can check out too, even if you haven't read The Wheel of Time, and you might be able to see if this might be a good series for you. But anyway, that's enough of all that spoiler warning stuff. It's a struggle today already, Charles. So that's enough spoiler warning, because it's time to get into where we are tier ranking these Wheel of Time characters 3 books in. And we'll revisit these things later on too. We're just saying 3 books in, where are we at with these characters?
That's important. So we're ranking a character as of their performance through Book 3. Now, if they go on to do something cooler in later books, or they get lamer in later books, then we'll revisit the tier list and we'll see how they fare in later books. I think it'll be interesting to compare these characters across different chunks of the series as we read them. But today we're doing some just good old-fashioned fun tier list rankings for some of the most popular characters in the first 3 books of Wheel of Time. And let's not delay any longer. Let's get right into it. Dylan, where would you like to start?
Well, how about Matt?
Oh.
Let's start with Matt, because Matt is one of the clear fan favorites here, and I want to start with someone that would be interesting to talk about. There's always a lot to talk about with him.
That is well said, sir. Matt is definitely one of those ones that on our show people were like, "Oh, Dylan, you're gonna love Matt." And even I, when pitching it, I was like, "You might like characters like Matt," and that wasn't the case for a while. And I don't remember, I was reminding myself when I was rereading, wow, Matt doesn't have the greatest start for our main protagonists here. He's kind of the one in the back complaining, and he doesn't get the chance to shine really until Dragon Reborn.
That's true. And Charles, did we already explain what our tiers are here? That there's S, A, B, C, D are our options.
Yes.
We know this is an audio format. We don't have a video format for it, but we will be, which is, for us, it's really just an excuse to talk about the characters and how we're feeling about them. But we will be sending out on Instagram and Twitter where we land on this tier ranking. But let's not do Matt dirty here, Charles. Let's talk about this character that, honestly, if we were doing our tier ranking for for the Wheel of Time for the first time after, let's say, the Great Hunt, even, or after the Eye of the World, let's say, I would have a hard time putting Matt even above like C at that point because all he does through the Eye of the World is basically just like steal that dagger, or like I guess steal isn't the right word. Take that dagger, and then he just is like unconscious and being mischievous and sometimes mean and not liked by other people. And yeah, I don't know. After the Eye of the World, I might have been putting him as low as it's C or even D. But now he's I mean, dude,
C is
that
a
early
fair.
on,
You make a good
after
case.
the Eye of the World.
Yeah,
Dude, he does. What is there about Matt after the first book that would make you put him above other characters? I don't know. But anyway, let me talk about where he is now, which is after the Dragon Reborn. So Matt's arc, I guess, really starts changing for me when he blows the horn in the Great Hunt. That was like the first moment where I was like, okay, wait, this guy's got it, because I don't know, that horn is all over the place throughout the Great Hunt. It's like going from hand to hand to hand to hand. And the whole time we're like, dude, someone's got to blow this thing. And I was just waiting for Rand to get over all of his, especially early on there in Eye of the World and in the Great Hunt, this Rand, like, I'm just a shepherd. Like, I'm just sheep herder from the Two Rivers.
Right.
It's like, okay, eventually he's going to get past that. He's going to blow this horn. But it's not Rand. It is Matt who finally takes the initiative and blows the horn. And once he does that, and then once he's healed from all the stuff he's going through with the dagger, or maybe not all of it, but enough of it to just be himself, and he starts getting point of view, his voice is so unique and interesting, and a lot of times funny, and he has become one of my top maybe 3 characters or so, I would say.
Great.
At this point. I have more to say on that, Charles, but I'll let you say something.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I would agree. I think at the end of Eye of the World, Matt's hovering around the C range. I don't know if I have it in my heart to give him D, but you make a case that is worthy of consideration for D. And then it's by the end of the Great Hunt that he's moving up, and then by the end of Dragon Reborn, he's even higher. Is he S tier? Not by the end of Dragon Reborn. Is he A tier? Maybe. I'm thinking he's in the B plus, A B minus range. So It depends the kind of mood I'm in. I think he's got to put respect on the name and nudge it up to A, but I do want to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm thinking A as well, Charles. Okay. And the only thing that, it depends how many characters we're down to put in S, but it's like, if I'm saying for me personally, and I guess our list here, Charles, is more of a conglomeration of where we meet in the middle with where we're at with characters or whatever. But if I were ranking, I would say Matt might be like my 3rd favorite character or so. So yeah, A makes a lot of sense. The only thing keeping him from S for me is like the way he makes me cringe with his interactions around women, honestly. So.
Yeah, but I feel like that is very cringy. He gets kind of redeemed in that sense when all the people around him don't put up with it and don't like him for that. So that kind of makes it okay, but it doesn't make him any better. He's got some...
yeah, go ahead.
At least it's not endorsed by the author. People, he does get put down a lot by his friends and things for that kind of behavior.
I mean, we talked about this some in our Dragon Reborn episode, and I think it's kind of in this place with Matt where he's supposed to come off like he's really charming at first to the women around him, and then as they get to know him more, then they realize that he's like not as charming, kind of more selfish and those kind of things, and they get sick of him. And that's a thing. I feel like I'd like the portrayal of Matt better if people did. I just think the things he's doing off the top would be considered kind of creepy,
Right.
honestly.
So
Like at
creepy slash
first.
cringy behavior plus his
Yeah.
poor showing in the first half of these books puts
Yeah.
him, even though he's one of our favorites, you can't give him S. You just
He
can't.
has
So
S level moments. He's
yeah,
got like S level
S tendencies.
voice, kind of some S tendencies, and if he can get past some of these more cringy interactions with women, I'd be down to put him into S eventually. We'll see where
Yeah.
he goes with all of that. He just needs to mature a lot, I think,
Yeah.
Matt. And we've got 11 more books for him to do that, so I'm hopeful with Matt. And like his point of view chapters might be the most enjoyable of any point of view chapters for me. It's like him, or maybe, well, we'll get there.
That's well said.
Yeah.
So Matt at A. We got to keep this thing
Yes.
moving, keeping it moving. So let's make sure we get a lot more of these main characters out of the way here. I'm going to put up. Let's put up. Why not Elaine? Let's take a look at
Yeah.
Elaine. So Elaine is one that is interesting. She doesn't. She has minor appearances in the first book, and she appears a lot more when she joins Nynaeve and Egwene and Min in Tar Valon as this
Yeah.
kind of group. And we talked about in our Dragon Reborn episode that we finally start to see her voice come out a little bit in Dragon Reborn, as she finally is kind of like this mediator between two very
Yes.
strong bullheaded people in Nynaeve and Egwene, and she finds her own voice and manages to keep the peace. So we like her for that, and we look forward to seeing more from her. My question is, does she do enough to break out? You're gonna say yes, but to break out of C range into B
Yes.
range.
Come on, dude. Elaine is at least a B on our tier list as a character, I think. Like she definitely early on could use a bit more like voice and something to make her feel more different from some other characters or what have you, but she totally finds that in The Dragon Reborn, and she got our most improved character.
She did. Yep.
I mean, she
I'm happy
put her
to
in
give her
the
B. Yeah, I'm happy to give her
category.
B.
Yeah.
So
She's great. I
yeah,
like Elaine.
and I think she just suffers from not enough screen time and not enough. Well, we want to see more. We want more, and we are looking at her career with great interest as we continue our read of these books. So, is there anyone that's pulling you for our next name, Dylan?
How about your guy there, Charles Perrin?
Oh, Perrin's a great pick. I just want to go with A right away.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm trying to find him here. That is where I am going. I don't know what you think, Dylan.
I think A actually does make a lot of sense with Perrin because I think he's more consistent than someone like Matt. Like he's like an A kind of throughout the whole first 3 books, where Matt has his like C level moments and then has his S level moments.
Yes.
But Perrin's just kind of old, reliable,
Yeah.
out there, being an interesting, well-rounded character. Has this kind of inner conflict that feels very believable. And I'm gonna say Perrin A. Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
I agree. He's also like one of these breakthrough characters that you see a lot more of in modern fantasy. This reluctant hero type, this more humble, modest guy who's getting more involved in the grand scheme of this story. So for those reasons, I just really like watching him.
Charles.
Yeah.
What? Isn't Perrin like your favorite character? You don't feel like he would be S for you then?
He's one of my favorites. I don't know if we can break him through to S because, like you said, he's old, reliable, right? He's constantly delivering that A-level quality, but for me, S is a highly coveted spot. You gotta really grab us and shake us to get us
grab
into
us
S.
and shake us.
And Perrin is too mild-mannered to get us there. I think he's really well written. I think he's one of the most unique voices in Rothfuss in RJ's work. So in that sense, I think he's the most original character Rothfuss has written so far in terms of
Rothfuss.
Rothfuss. RJ has written
Robert Jordan,
Robert
the author
Jordan,
of
the
the
author
Wheel
of the Wheel of Time. Yes, so it's the most unique voice that, in terms of like fantasy tropes that he's written. A lot of these characters fall into some pretty hard tropes, and that's good. But Perrin stands out to me as his own mold, kind of. So I want to give respect to that, but I want to put respect on the S tier as well. So I'm holding back, but strong A. I mean, do you think he did anything S-worthy?
No. But I guess I thought this might be one where you were like flirting with the idea of putting Perrin in S, and I'd have to be like, he's great, but let's give him that A because of all the points you just made. I just thought you'd be a little higher on Perrin than you are, but you're kind of where I'm at.
I mean, A is very commendable.
A is great,
and he's up there with Matt, and that's where he deserves to be. And you said it well, where Matt's got peaks and valleys, but Perrin's just this plateau at A, and that's how they both are able to stand together there. So Perrin,
that's fair.
A. Let's move on. Let's try. Do you have any? There's so many to choose from. We got so many to go. Is there anyone pulling you strongly any direction?
Let's go with Nynaeve. Why not?
Ooh, Nynaeve. That is a good one. I honestly don't know where to put Nynaeve. She has some of my favorite moments in these first 3 books. That has her flirting with S for me. Flirting with S.
I mean, here's where I'm at, Charles. I think if I was left to my own devices, I might put her in A. But I feel able to be talked up to S. So give me what's making you think that she might be S.
Here's why I think she might be S. First of all, her moments in the Trials of the Accepted were some of the best moments in these 3 books, and I want to put respect on that. Her trials are incredibly well written and super interesting, and a lot of that has to do with Nynaeve as a character. I'm also interested in where her story's going. Her internal conflict is very interesting. She's training to be an Aes Sedai, but she hates Aes Sedai, and how does that play itself out? Her responsibility as a wisdom leader of the 2 rivers, and how she had to leave that responsibility behind to pursue something greater is just super thought-provoking and interesting. And Matt and Perrin have great moments, but they don't pick at my brain like Nynaeve does, and has me thinking of themes and interesting elements of responsibility and power like Nynaeve does. So she's definitely a super strong A. My only thing is there's a lot that there's the romance plot line with Nynaeve, there's the braid pulling, there's that stubborn bullheaded behavior over and over again that kind of holds her back a little bit, but is it enough to hold her back from S?
She's like an A+ or an S- is kind of where I feel like, and I think you make a great point. She has these really shining moments. I'll also say, maybe it's good for us to clarify, we're rating the characters more on like how compelling they are than like likable or anything like that.
Yes.
Like, I think Nynaeve is part of what makes her such a compelling character is that she's so rough around the edges and not as likable as some other characters might be.
Right.
And she's so compelling because she has that inner conflict you were talking about, Charles, where she's she has risen to this position of responsibility at a very young age and has had to step into this older sister, mother type role with a lot of the other characters in a way that she wouldn't be able to, and she wouldn't be able to be taken seriously in if she acted less bullheaded, less
exactly.
Did it so I don't know. And even just as we're talking here, Charles, she's like, I find myself very interested in the stuff that starts coming up when we talk about Nynaeve.
Me too.
So let's give her an S tier ranking.
Whoa.
Let's just do it.
Da,
We don't
da,
have any
da,
S tier yet.
da.
So,
Nynaeve, an
yeah.
S. I am
We'll see if
happy
that
with
ends up
that. It's
controversial.
as you
Yeah.
started exploring it, and I was like, I could talk more and more about Nynaeve's character,
Right.
more so than Matt, more so than Perrin. So
I
it's
agree.
either Matt and Perrin aren't A's, which I don't think that's the case. So I think it's Nynaeve is the S. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, Nynaeve is S.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if people react to that one because I feel like sometimes people, this comes up for us a lot, Charles. I feel like where it's like we're so focused on this, like they're compelling, they're interesting, and like blah blah blah, and then people are like, I don't like that person, like I don't like that character because they're like annoying.
Yeah.
And I think that Nynaeve is a character that's like very very compelling and is also like very aggravating for a lot of people.
Yeah,
and
there's
in a lot
a
of
good
ways, the things that are
character and there's a
aggravating-
good
yes.
person. You know, that's we talk about
Yes.
that constantly, and we're willing to give Nynaeve an S because we think she's a good character.
And deep down, a good person.
Deep down,
just
a
an
good
aggravating
just-
person to
yeah,
be around.
you gotta work
Yeah.
through that rough exterior, and you know who was able to do that was Lan.
Ooh, that's such a great seg, Charles.
Thank
You're a pro.
you.
So,
we've
Lan,
got Lan.
yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't know, Dylan. Like for me, C or B for
Whoa,
Lan.
C is harsh for Lan.
What does he do beyond be the sword guy? That's my.
I think I don't know. C. You're saying he's like the clear worst character we've talked about yet. I guess we've talked about a lot of good
I think
characters,
Lan is a good like litmus test of okay, are you better than Lan? Then you're good. Are you
better
worse
than
than Lan? Then you're bad. And Lan is just kind of in the middle. I think.
But the middle would be a B.
I think the middle. I think C is average, man. C is
C
average.
is average if you. Okay, this is my other issue with.
S
You're not
is-
gonna like.
S
I spent
is-
time talking about S is no, Charles. The S A B C D thing is because we're afraid to accept the fact that if we went with this like A B C D F ranking, which is like more sensible to me, then we would be giving characters Fs, and then people would be upset. So I'm like, C might be average if you do a letter grading thing, the way that like it's done in school. But honestly, Charles, a C here is the second lowest ranking. It's not the middle. And if you think he's middle, I think he's a B. Like I don't know. But I mean, let's talk about Lan as a character, not tier list as a format. I'll save that for our podcast logistic meetings. But the the thing about Lan that I find interesting is we talked about this in our Sidekicks that stole the show episode some, which is he's a natural born leader, but he's almost relegated to this sidekick position. And that inner turmoil and conflict that you watch him live out in his relationship with Moraine and his interactions with Nynaeve too, where he's like, I'm not a leader who can choose what I'm going to do, and if I could choose that, I'd probably like follow my heart and be with you and those kind of things.
Yeah.
But instead, I have to like kind of follow Moraine around. I don't know. I just think there's like he's got legs as a character in a way that I don't really feel comfortable giving him a C. I want to give him a B.
I mean,
We'll get to C characters, Charles. We're talking about like the best ones. now.
Your most compelling argument is that C's kind of below average. Look for me as a character, yes, he has legs, but what has he done? Nothing. And is his relationship with Nynaeve even good or interesting or well founded? I don't think so. I read it and I was like, this relationship's kind of coming out of nowhere, and I'm not
That's
super.
not most based on the Fantology best romances poll, Charles. I think most people disagree with you there.
Well, I don't
I'm
think they're
not saying-
going, like what we've read so far. Do you think there's a case to be made that it's one of the best romances in fantasy?
I think any case can be made. People have
Would
their
you
own
make
taste
the
as to what they
case?
like. I would not personally.
Exactly.
There's a
I
reason
wouldn't
we
either.
didn't include Lan and Nynaeve as one of our top 3 romances. We'll see where it goes down the line because I don't know, and it's really hard for me 3 out of 14 books in to tell people who've read 14 books anything about like what would be the best romance. They've got 11 books of development and all this kind of stuff to see where it goes. But all that being said, they're not my favorite romance. I'm not telling you go put Lan up in so he can be with Nynaeve forever. I'm saying like I'm saying if
B's
you
fine.
think he's average, give him a B.
I think
That's
he's
what I'm saying.
average. I'll give him the B. He's got
Average for a Wheel of Time character, which is still good.
Which is still good. Yes, amongst
Yeah.
his peers, he's average.
Yes.
And-
The whole list is relative to Wheel of
Exactly.
Time, not like big picture, like this character gets a D. It's like this character gets a D potentially compared to other Wheel of Time characters, I guess. Is how I'm thinking about it.
Exactly. And that is why I think B is good. You can make the case for C, but I'm happy with B. Let's move on to our next characters. Pull a name out of a hat here. Is there someone grabbing your interest?
Well, let's talk Ingtar, Charles. Ingtar.
Ingtar. Okay. So what do you think?
We need some perspective here, Charles.
All right.
Let's talk about Ingtar. So, do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So Ingtar is the character who is like leading the hunt for the horn in a lot of ways. He's got this, for me, kind of one-dimensional note of like, I want the horn, I want the horn, I want the horn. And I hope people don't love Ingtar. I never see people talking about him. But like that, I was like, geez, like this guy, he needs a little more depth. And it feels like the way that RJ tried to give him depth was with this kind of like reveal at the end of The Great Hunt that the whole time he had been a traitor, but then he was inspired by Rand to like not be a traitor anymore. And the whole thing to me, like there are so many like The Great Hunt has so many amazing moments. This was not one of them for me.
Yeah.
And Ingtar, I don't think I ever really got him as a character. I don't think I was ever really intrigued by him as a character, and I think I would be honestly fine giving him a D, if not a C, if you want to push.
Yeah. C.
It doesn't do it for me.
C at the most. I agree that reveal at the end of like I was a dark friend, but seeing you, Rand, do something inspired me to sacrifice myself right now. And you're like, what is happening? So let's give that D. Like, what was that?
What was that?
We got to give that
Love
a
it,
D.
Charles. You're dropping amazing. I'm loving your quotes today.
It's like that. Something has to get a D, and I feel like the rushed, unearned, not even interesting twists, reveals, heroic death, it all fell flat. And so amongst his peers, he is a D. So that is totally fine with me to put Ingtar at D. Let's bring in someone with a bit higher of a pedigree. Let's bring in Min. Min's an interesting case because she starts off as kind of this character you run into for a little bit. She's the fortune teller machine, and then she comes back and she has like this whole roguish bit to her and these romance potentially things going to her, and she's becoming more intertwined with Egwene and Elaine, and she's like the third person in that trio. So how does she compare is the question. Does she hold up with Elaine at B? Better? Worse? Where are we thinking?
I think that Min is a character at this point, 3 books in, as a first-time reader here, is more intriguing in a lot of ways than a character like Elaine, but has done less to less at this point to make me, I guess, attached to her as a character than Elaine has. So it's kind of like I see her around the same level as Elaine. I'm leaning toward B right off the bat with Min, where I think she's like a good character. I've been waiting to see more from her, and she has all of this interesting stuff going on with the prophecies she can give. When she is on the page, she does kind of jump off the page when she's doing stuff.
That's true.
But she just hasn't had the same, I think, attention given to her yet as someone like Elaine, and definitely not as like the people, some of these others we talked about, like Matt Perrin, Nynaeve, and stuff. So I'm kind of leaning toward B. I do
Mhm.
see her as like I'm more interested in her as a character than Lan, maybe. So if we're splitting up among the B tier, she'd definitely be at the higher end. But yeah, she's a
Right.
B
That's well
tier for
said.
me.
I think, like you said, she's more interesting than Lan, but not enough to make her A. She's got,
Right.
she jumps off the page. I agree, especially in the later books when you get kind of this like
No
the
spoilers, Charles.
I'm talking about book 3, like the later of the
Oh,
ones that
later
we've
books
read.
of the
Yeah,
ones we've
like
read. Gotcha.
the fallacy of fortune telling and
Yes.
prophecy, and that's super interesting. But then she kind of gets shoehorned into these things like, oh, I'm wearing breeches, and
Right.
oh, I love Rand too. It's like, you do, based on what? So like those kind of things pull her back. The fact she didn't really get to do much pulls her back, but we think she's super interesting, and she jumps off the page, and she's one of the crew, so you gotta give
Yeah.
her a love for that. So B all the way for Min. I agree completely.
Cool.
That's where she belongs. Let's pull up. Here's one that I think is interesting. Tom Maryland.
Yeah, Tom is interesting. I guess the Tom thing, I'll start by saying he seems to be one of the most beloved characters in this series. When I communicate with people on Twitter and stuff like that, he comes up all the time, and I guess I see his charm, and I see him almost as one of these characters that if this was like a likability or like charisma or like those kind of things, if that's what we were ranking these characters by, he'd be way up and we'd move Nynaeve way down and blah 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 blah, right?
Mhm.
Like he's a character that I see why people latch onto him as someone they like. For me, I don't know. He's never jumped off the page as particularly interesting in the same at the
Hmm.
same level as some of these other characters. He's a good character, step back and think about it, but as Wheel of Time characters go, I think that there's better to offer from some of these ones we've talked about before.
That's well said. I think what saves Tom from mediocrity is his voice. Like so many of these characters, like even Perrin and Rand, when they talk, you're like, this is so boring. But when Tom talks, at least something, he's got an interesting voice. And I have to give credit to Michael Kramer. He breathes so much life into Tom. I think Tom is his best performance in the
Mm,
audiobooks. Michael Kramer being the audiobook
yes,
narrator for The Wheel of Time
alongside Kate Redding.
alongside Kate
Yeah.
Redding. But I think of all of Michael Kramer's performances, I think Tom is his best. And I think that comes a lot from Tom being such a understandable character. He's just a natural flowing character. His dialogue is very honest. And in the beginning of Eye of the World, that's not easy to find. There's so much still sticking to that Lord of the Rings structure with some of these
Right.
characters that Tom comes in and he's like just sweeping the up the adventure and taking the kids under his wing, and I want to give him respect for that. But then there's things where he's honestly like a bit of a womanizer type. I'm not too crazy about that, and he doesn't really do too much. I'm thinking he's a strong B. That's what I'm thinking.
Yep. I'm with you there, Charles.
All right, let's move it right along. Strong B for Tom. Who shall we talk about next?
Let's talk about Lanfear, Charles. Let's throw Lanfear in the mix.
Okay, Lanfear.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is a character that is it's hard to know at this point. I guess I have a theory that has looked more and more accurate but just has not explicitly been revealed technically that Celine is Lanfear. So I'm going to work under the assumption that those characters are the same when I'm trying to make this ranking here, Charles.
Okay.
So I think she's like much more interesting from her role in the plot than she's been so far from like a compelling character, I guess. Like we talked a little bit about one dimension from Ingtar. I think Lanfear has more depth than Ingtar from what I can see, but she is kind of just this like go for glory, blow the horn, like whatever type character in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
she's
So
fine. She's
it's like,
fine. But like she comes in right away and she's like, "You should be the one that blows the horn." And
right.
Randa's like, "Should I be suspicious of her? She looks suspicious and she sounds suspicious." And you're like, "Okay, okay, okay." So in that sense, like I'm looking at the B tier and I see Elaine, Lan, Min, Tom.
Yeah.
You cannot
You
put
can't put her
Lanfear in
there.
that company. But she's not.
Not yet,
She's not
anyway.
like. There's nothing essentially wrong. Maybe she's a bit too, I'm going to say, basic for my taste. So
Right.
I think that gets her in the C range.
I'm with you.
All right, Lanfear in C. That was an interesting pick. I like it.
I was kind of, yeah. Part of it was I was seeing if we just pick all the like top characters, we're just gonna end up with such a top heavy list. So we gotta get
pad
some
it
other
out.
yeah.
So let's get some other people in here. How about Tam, Rand's father?
Just haven't seen enough from him. I feel like it's like, what does Tam do? Like Tam sits around and like gets his butt kicked by a bunch of Trollocs, and then like we know he has some sort of history as to why he has that sword, but he just kind of like gets fever dreams and gives away like really big plot points that I have to make sure I highlight when he's saying them, and he's like, "I'm not your father, Rand," and then Rand is like, "Yes, you are. Come on, dude. Like you're totally my father."
Yeah, and
You
then
would-
he's like, "Well, I'll see you later. Bye." And then into obscurity for Tam.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to like. I don't know if he deserves the D, but but he definitely gets
on,
the
Charles,
C.
keep rolling.
But I think he definitely lands in C category.
Yeah,
It's a
I
low
agree with you
C
there.
though, and that's only because of just the pure lack of screen time, and
Yeah.
not because of anything that he's done or anything we don't like about him. Just the fact that he's so obscure at this point puts him in C. So that is Tam Althor, Rand's father. How about well,
Charles, don't be Rand here.
he is his father. He is.
Rand's just a sheep herder from the Two Rivers.
Yeah, my father is Tam Althor. So who shall we bring into the fray now?
How about let's talk Egwene. It's time, Charles.
Oh boy, I think I know where this is going, but I'll let you bring us into it.
Yeah, I mean, Egwene is my favorite character so far. I think she has such an interesting and fresh, like I want to say, initiative to her, and pluckiness, and just proactiveness in a way in which, in a series, I've said this before, kind of like in a series characterized by a bunch of reluctant characters, I love that Egwene is just like, look, I'm not an innkeeper's daughter anymore. Once I decided I was going off here, I'm like, I'm going to train for being an Aes Sedai. I'm going to learn how to do magic and channel. And if we end up in these situations where folks are threatening me, I'm going to make earth blow up near them, even if I'm not particularly powerful. She tries to take on the like really tough like Forsaken level opponents in the Eye of the World, even though she's totally not ready for it. And I love that, yeah, that pluckiness, and she's intrepid, Charles, and she also gets some of these really interesting moments, like Test of the Accepted level moments. She has that awesome, like, "Is this all there is for me?"
Yeah.
speech from
Yeah.
Kate, like that you played that after the show for me from Kate Redding, and it's such a brilliant performance.
Yes.
And it's like, give Kate Redding, for her portrayal of Egwene, whatever the audiobook equivalent of an Oscar is.
Yeah, I would agree.
I know there is an award. I just can't think. It's like an Audi or something, an Audi or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't quote me on that, listeners. But there's an award for that. Like, give it to Kate Redding for her portrayal of Egwene there, and give Egwene props. Put her in the S tier, Charles. You gotta do it, man. She's so
Ooh,
good.
I'm okay with that. You know, I think for the longest time she was at A, and she's got a lot of S tendencies, and you just gotta respect that speech you're talking about. I'm happy to put her in S, up in with Nynaeve.
Yeah. Okay.
And it wasn't until later showings. I feel like in Eye of the World she's A, and
That's fair.
maybe even in The Great Hunt she's A. Actually, no, because I
The
really like the
Damani
Damani
stuff you
stuff.
like a lot.
Yeah,
She's
that's
got a very,
S,
like,
S,
her-
S.
Yeah. And just that moment, Charles, where she's like trying to just basically, I think she was trying to strangle the person who had her in the Damani position after she escapes, and she's like gonna kill the person. Basically, she's intense, and I don't know. I mean, that's again not a thing that makes her more likable, but it's a thing that brings more depth to a character that is like one of the heroes and is a character that we root for and a protagonist. But it's like, I don't know. She feels very. There's just something very genuine to her as a character that not not all the characters have that much authenticity to them. She's a woman. She's such a great character.
Great character. All right, let's see here. We gotta come up with a few of these quick. So, how about Padon Fane? I think we gotta get more villainous characters in the mix, and Padon Fane is one of the main ones. This character to me is one of the more interesting in terms of what is going on with this person. There's this combination of the corruption from the dagger and being a dark friend, and the amount of atrocities that this character commits, the level of violence he's willing to go to, his voice and how Robert Jordan has written his dialogue and his internal monologues. It's breaks the pacing of this book whenever he comes on and we get his POV, and for those reasons I'm sitting in the A range.
I'm not a Padon Fane fan, Charles.
Lay it on me.
I don't know. The guy, he doesn't interest me much as a villain. I think I like villains that are well-rounded and think of themselves as heroes. I know we don't get a lot of that in The Wheel of Time.
You do not.
And Padon, he's like worse Gollum is kind of how I think of him.
He is a Gollum-esque type.
Yeah,
but he's evil.
But he's not as interesting to me as Gollum, and that's
he's
in
not
part
as
because
interesting
Gollum
as
is
Gollum.
well-rounded
Yeah.
and like I don't know if Gollum would think of himself as a hero, but he's like this like he's not an outright villain. And Padon Fane, where he really lost me, Charles, I've talked about this before in some of our Bite Read episodes. The guy in his own internal monologue is like, I'm going to do stuff like a worm, like I'm going to burrow in here like a worm. It's like, dude, no one thinks of themselves like a worm. Like, put him, like, yeah, I see you putting him lower onto. I'll agree with B. He doesn't do it for me, and honestly, if I was left to my own devices, he might be C, and well, that's why we're in the middle. Yeah.
He's got too much flavor in him to be in C. I will agree he's a bit one-dimensional, and he's villain, but he is kind of an outlier in a lot of ways. Like, not as much as Gollum is an outlier in the Lord of the Rings story, but yeah, I don't know. He's kind of interesting. I don't think he deserves the C. I think he's right there on the cusp, so I'll give him the B.
Okay.
So let's get one of these main characters in here, Dylan. Let's go ahead and get one of the big ones. Let's get Moiraine in the mix.
Ooh.
I know you got strong feelings about Moiraine.
Yeah. Again, a character that sticks out to me for being proactive in ways that not a lot of characters in this series tend to be. She gets that, like, one of my favorite moments, maybe my favorite moment in the whole series so far, where she just, while Bilal, one of the Forsaken, is like laughing at her, like, oh, I'm so powerful, whatever. Moiraine just steps in, doesn't hesitate, and balefires him and just incinerates him. And it's like, those moments for me just stick out in ways that, yeah, like very few, if any, other moments in the entire Wheel of Time stick out. I think you could talk. I would probably, left to my own devices, give her an S for those moments, but you could talk me down maybe to an A. But I don't know. She's awesome.
It's hard when you're considering all the Wheel of Time characters not to put Moiraine at the top.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
The question is she better than Nynaeve or Egwene, or is she on the same level? And I'm
Well,
happy to put her on the same level, you know?
there's nothing higher
I know
on
there's
our.
nothing higher,
Yeah.
but I'm just making sure we have these in the right. But like,
Yeah.
if this doesn't affect the tier ranking, like, do we need an F and then hold the S to a higher standard? Is what I don't know, but I think we can
Ah,
keep it as it is and
th- yeah.
keep Moraine up there with Nynaeve and Egwene.
I think if you wanted to put Nynaeve down to A, I would definitely be okay with that. Um, but I
That's
was
true.
yeah, it's like if we
We need
talked about
to.
Egwene and Moraine first, then we probably would have put Nynaeve in A. I bet.
I would still be on the fence because Nynaeve has one of my favorite moments, but I'm happy to do that. I think we got to put more. The S tier can't have like 3 people in it. It needs to be a more exclusive club. And if
Okay.
one of those characters had to go, it would be Nynaeve, and
Right.
she's just an A plus kind of situation. I think is
Yeah.
fair, and I think a lot of the Wheel of Time fans out there would agree with this move. So
Oh
I'm
yeah, I
happy.
thought it might be controversial if we put her in S, honestly, where people get bugged by, and there's like braid pulling and things like that that
Yeah, okay.
kind of would make it be like, okay, even if she's fantastic in every other way, you could argue just you
Right.
downgrade her for being for
That's fair.
that
I do want to
braid
make
pulling
the
stuff
S
being
tier a
annoying.
bit more exclusive. So we can't have
That's
more
fair.
S tiers than A tiers. So gotta put
That's
her in
fair.
A. Great. So should we do like a rapid fire of some of these more minor
Minor
characters
ones, yeah.
as we work our way? All right. So
Okay.
rapid fire, we got Balthamel, who immediately is one of the Forsaken who gets immediately murked by the Green Man in the Eye of the World. Like, this is supposed to be the big bad of this book. Doesn't last. I say D.
I don't know if he's big bad.
He is for that book.
Beelzemon was still the big bad of that book, I would say.
Yeah, but this is
We have to,
this is the final
yeah,
showdown.
yeah, but big bad is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
above
yeah,
that.
yeah. What do you agree with D or would you
Yes.
put okay. So next we've got let's put while we're at it, Bilal, as you had mentioned, got destroyed by Moraine in an epic moment, perhaps your favorite moment in the
Yeah.
series. Does that move him up as a character for
Yeah.
getting destroyed?
I think it's like if you think of what the character does for Robert Jordan as a part of this story, he does a lot more than Balthamel does, and is like more. I don't know if he's personally more interesting, but it's like the use of that character is more interesting. So yeah, give him a C.
Give him a C. Elias, the other wolf brother that saves Perrin and Egwene and helps Perrin realize what his, like, for lack of a better word, powers are. This guy, he's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
He's
dude,
hovering around the C range for me.
for me, he's more interesting than Pat on Fane by like how are we putting Pat on Fane? If you want to give either of those, I agree with Charles. I know it's rapid fire time.
All right, well, I'll move Pat on Fane down and I'll put Elias down. They're all in C
Okay,
now. That's fine
gotcha.
with me. That's Elias. So keeping this rapid fire going. Pew 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 pew. Fail. She doesn't make an appearance until book 3. She is the Raven that was foretold by Min to Perrin, and Perrin's like, is she attractive? Is she not attractive? I don't know.
The big conflict. And, yeah,
Poor Perrin.
That's not my favorite. That whole shtick,
No,
but
it's
she's
weird.
you're right. Uh, so yeah, looks like. Are you leaning a direction? It's rapid fire, Charles. You pick one.
B or C, I don't care. Do you have a preference? I think she's kind of
Uh,
average.
Yeah,
And if we're
we'll give
saying
it-
B is middle of the
it's
road.
tough to. Dude, Elaine is such a. I don't know. She might be C, Elaine and
Oh yeah,
Min
Elaine, Min, Tom. Yeah, that's
are B.
yeah. So let's put her in
Yeah,
C. That's
yeah.
fair. She's C. Easy C. Okay. Now we have. Let's just do quickly. Galad and Gawain. 2 very distinct characters, Dylan.
I, d- I, st- I'm sorry, Wheel of Time fans. I struggle to tell these two apart sometimes. I know one of them is. I know they're both basically. I might get hate. They are both, to my knowledge, like honorable to some degree, and like the other characteristic is like handsome, which is like, come on, have a better character trait. And honorable to some degree and handsome to some degree, and one of them's particularly known for being honorable, and one of them's particularly known for being handsome. And it's like you can do RJ, you can and have done better. Just put them both in C, honestly.
Both in C, I'm happy with that. Yeah, one
Yeah.
is tall and handsome with brown hair. The other is tall and handsome with blonde hair, Dylan. Their personalities could not be more different.
Yeah. And I'm seeing the C is getting filled up a lot here, Charles, and it makes me wonder if maybe we can rearrange a little bit at the end to.
We can
Yeah.
do a
Yeah.
rearrange, but I think we're in a good place with a few minor edits. But these minor characters are helping us get a sense of these tiers and where they stand.
Right.
Another really rapid fire one: Luz Theron Telemond. We get from the prologue. I feel like it's almost kind of unfair because the prologue is super good.
Yeah.
But
I
is that how we can rank Luz Theron? Like it's a shame to put him with
give
like
him a B at least.
with Elaine and Tom, who get so much more screen time. But respect to the prologue.
Yeah, that prologue's incredible.
Prologue is incredible.
And he's like his legend lingers in the story. It's like I win again, Luz Theron.
Yes,
right.
Yes, his
So,
story
yeah.
does linger. Okay, Queen Morghese. Queen Morghese, the Queen of Andor, mother of Elaine and Gawain and Galad.
I kind of yeah.
At
C or B.
C or B. I thought that whole thing where Rand falls in the garden and she's like, "Okay, I'll let you go," or whatever. This, that. I'm like, okay, like I don't quite get what's happening here. It's weird that you'd like be holding him hostage and also letting him go. I don't know. So C for me is fine, and she hasn't really done anything.
Not a lot of screen time.
Not a lot
either.
of screen time, and that's her biggest. That's the biggest reason she's in C. So Morghese, and then the Amelin seat. I'm going to try and say this: Swan Sanche.
Sure. C or B again to me.
I'm happy. Oh, man, I want to put her higher than Morghese, but then I see Elaine and Min and Tom.
That's what I was saying, Charles. Is like that's why I was thinking there might be some rearranging to do to like even move like Elaine and Min up to A, and then get some other characters that are in C right now. Like Fail is better than Galad and Gawain and stuff. And
Is
get
she
those
though?
up
I
to...
feel like Fail, Galad, and Gawain are like pretty comparable.
Fail.
Fail.
Okay.
It's pronounced kind of with a V. Yeah. I feel like they're all
I
comparable.
feel like, or Elias. Elias is probably B in our new little arrangement here.
Okay.
So it'd be like, because like should this? I feel like the listeners can't see this, but right now our C looks like the one that's sticking out really far because we have a lot of characters in it. And I feel like that should be the B, the middle, right? So we'll rearrange more, but that's kind
so
of
there was some movement. So A tier is now Matt, Perrin, Nynaeve, and we put Min and Elaine in there, which I think is good. B tier, we have Lan, Tom, Luz Theron, Swan Sanche, and Elias. Now, Swan Sanche, I might move down. That's like too high for her, but I do like that she's got all those fishing puns and all that. She's fun. I liked reading her, but I don't know if she stands up with Lan and Tom. She's more like a B minus. And then C, you have Lanfear, Tam, Balal, Padon Thane, Vail, Galad, Gawain, and Morghese, which I'm okay with that. So that ends the rapid fire section. There's really only two big characters left, and that is the great Randall Thor and Loyal the Ogier. Let's do Loyal the Ogier.
Oh, God.
We've been saving this one towards the end, and that is because Loyal's kind of taken on a second life on our show on Twitter, hasn't he, Dylan?
Yep. Yes, he has, Charles. I don't have a lot. Well, actually, I guess I do have a lot to say about Loyal. Yeah, Loyal, there's like a thing now. That I don't like Loyal. It's like a meme. I feel like the thing about Loyal that gets me is he's always saying not to be hasty. Meanwhile, he's not really doing anything to move the plot along, and which it would be fine if I was interested in him as a character, but he's also kind of this like one-dimensional like he seems nice. He wants to write a book, I guess. He is he is loyal, both with an I and with a Y. Like, I mean, his name is the same as a characteristic he holds. Maybe that passes for being a good character or something. But I don't know. He's just like sitting there saying he wants to write a book. He's along for the ride, saying how everyone's Talvirin, and then he's like, "Oh, I want to write a book." And then what he does that bothers me, Charles, is maybe I'm a little bit hasty, as we've known. And when he's not moving things along, and I'm feeling like, "Come on, let's go, let's do something." Like, "Come on, Loyal, do something here." He's like, "Don't be hasty, Dylan." And I feel invalidated, honestly, by Loyal and the way he interacts with me as a reader. So, honestly, I don't even know what to do with him tier wise. I'm just gonna let you decide. I kind of said my piece.
You're abstaining. I'm looking at this list. He is one of the main ensemble. He's a unique voice. Fans remember him. We're talking about him. He's not A, but
No.
He's B. He's B.
I mean,
You're gonna put him on the same level as Lanfear and Tam and Bilal and no, he's with Lan and Tom and Elias.
I'm more interested in Lanfear than I am in Loyal.
What?
Yeah, at least she's doing stuff.
Dude, I think you gotta work with me a little bit, work with the fans, and let's get him in B. Come on, he's one of the main cast. He's not one of the better ones, which is why he's not an A. But he's up there with Lan and Tom. Come on. A.
Okay, at least
B,
with the
B.
But Lan and Tom, he's the lower end. Even you, Charles, have to think that Loyal's on the lower end of this B.
B minus is fine.
Lan and Tom in there.
I can get on board with that. But
Okay.
I mean,
I'm glad I'm glad we rearranged, because at one point Elaine and Min were in this B tier,
Elaine and Min had to go
and
up.
you cannot put Loyal with them.
No,
They are so much
you
better.
cannot. Yeah, that was that opened the tier rankings. It made it more obvious. It made it easier to put Loyal right here in B.
Okay.
So
also, yeah, that's fair.
I think that's good. Well, let us be hasty and move on to the end, the showstopper here, the one and only main character, Dragon Reborn, Rand al'Thor. Where are we thinking with Rand?
I think that there's so much to say.
I
about
know.
Rand.
The issue with Rand at the beginning is he's repeating obvious stuff. He's not getting it fast enough. He's fallen into this just your standard protagonist guy.
Right.
And it's not until Dragon Reborn that we get to see a little flavor with Rand, and he starts to kind of grow into this image of him we've been told over and over. So it's like judging him along all three books, I'm leaning towards A tier for Rand.
Honestly, I am too. I thought Rand would be this big conversation, but by doing this at the end, I'm kind of looking above the A tier and seeing Egwene and Moraine there all by their lonesome.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking below the A tier and seeing Loyal in the B tier, and I'm like, where else would Rand belong but between
I think some people
Loyal
might
and
expect to put him in
Egwene and
S,
Moraine?
but I don't think
come on.
he's S. And there's a lot of reasons why. This whole I'm a shepherd from the two rivers. Aes Sedai's aren't gonna pull my strings. You're like, okay, whatever. And you're 6'3" and super handsome and all powerful. That's really cool, man. All the women love you. Cool, dude. Good for you. But that's not enough reason for me to put you in S. Egwene and Moraine are doing stuff. They're having inner turmoil.
Right.
They're figuring things out. They're the center of a lot of these really interesting stories in different places, and I don't know, man. Rand for me is not at that level. He's getting to that level. I was super interested in him in Dragon Reborn, and that's the least screen time we had with him by far. It was getting out of his head and seeing him removed. That is what bumped him up to a high A for me.
I'm totally with you, Charles. The Dragon Reborn sticks out as a book in this series so far by letting Rand kind of get some distance and letting him breathe a little bit, not having the point of view so tight on top of him, whereas we like feel like we're sitting with him in all of his reluctance and questioning and all this kind of stuff, and we get to see what other people see in Rand, which is this epic character out there doing all of these really cool things. And if, honestly, if you asked me after the Eye of the World or even after the Great Hunt, I might even have been pushing to put Rand in B, but I think he makes a lot of sense after the Dragon Reborn, sitting in this A tier. And yeah, and Charles, can we at least have a little brief convo after about a tiny bit of even further rearranging?
Yeah, I
here,
mean, if
just to get all right.
if you're happy with Rand at A,
Yes.
okay, so we have completed the character tier list. Hooray! Now we'll take a woohoo! Yay! Now let's go.
We did the thing.
We'll go into review.
Ooh.
And this is where we'll make any slight adjustments. Dylan, what is popping out at you?
What's popping out to me now, I know the listeners can't see this thing, but it's that the C list is the one that is sticking out farthest, like has the most characters in it. And I think that's not fair to Wheel of Time as a series to
And
say
I think that
there's,
just
like,
goes
most of
by the
are
characters
C.
that we chose, right? Like we added a lot of characters that, aren't the main
Well,
characters.
I think, and honestly, part of why it's sticking out in that way is because I think that we have. Honestly, I think we could get characters like Padon Fane, who you were pushing for, and I was the one who dragged him down to a C. Like, I think we can move him up to a B now that my issue is seeing him next to people like Elaine and Min and being like, no. But now, if we move Padon Fane up to B, I think we're already doing a little bit better, and maybe even moving someone else down to D.
I was going
would
to say
have-
either Bilal or Morgay. I think Bilal's got to just go down.
Sure. I mean, it's really Moraine who gets the awesomeness of that moment with Bilal, so it's not Bilal. He serves a good purpose in the story, but as a character, what does he do for us?
Yeah,
So
nothing. Right, exactly.
I kind of think, and then the only last bit to discuss looking at this is now we have moved Nynaeve to the A tier when we wanted her in S. Do we want to revisit that, or do we feel very comfortable with where we're at?
I think you could make a case either way. See, honestly, it's tough. It's tough.
We're waffling on this
I'm
one.
waffling. I want to
Yeah.
respect the exclusivity of the S tier. 3
Okay.
is too many. And but what I'm asking myself is Egwene definitely definitely a notch above Nynaeve? Is Moraine definitely a notch above Nynaeve?
It's close.
It's so close. I think so. The braid pulling, at least. At the very
Yeah.
least. We got to remind
She was
ourselves.
pulled down to the A tier by her braid.
Well
Just tugged.
said.
She was in the S tier, and then we had her tugged down to the A tier. One last braid pull for Nynaeve at the end of the Dragon Reborn.
I think that's fair. The only thing that's sticking out to me is like Swan Sanche punching above her weight in the B tier. She's in really good company.
Like the two that are, or maybe even three in the B tier. So if we read the B tier, it's Lan, Tom, Lews Therin, Elias, Loyal, Swan, and Padon Fane. And it's kind of like, I actually feel very comfortable with it, but it's interesting seeing characters like Elias and Swan there alongside some of these people who get, and Lews Therin, of course, as people who get way more screen time.
Yeah.
Or page time.
I just don't know if is Tom an A. I
think you could easily make that case. Just looking at where it is now.
Because, I mean,
I'd be down.
Because we're putting Lan, and if you put Tom in A, where does Lan stand?
You could potentially put him in either of those, Charles. If you made a case for A, I'd be up for it. I think Tom would make more sense than Lan, but
well, okay. I think we gotta put Tom in A. I think that looks good.
That looks better.
That looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then putting Lan in B, I'm kind of happy with that because Lan, I wanted to see more than just the stereotypical stoic sword guy. And the relationship with Nynaeve is not fleshed out enough either.
Agreed.
So I'm or who knows. But as of book 3, I'm not sold. So I think that's got to pull him down. Like,
I mean, he certainly can't go on the same tier as Nynaeve.
No,
I mean, that's
cannot.
where it really starts being like, yeah.
Yeah, Nynaeve is like A+, and then the rest of these characters, like maybe Nynaeve and Rand are like, or Matt are A+, and then you have Perrin, Min, Elaine, Tom. You know, like I'm happy with this. This puts a lot of people in A, which is deserved, and
it's great characters.
A lot of great showings in B, and B is more along the lines of the great supporting character roles. So I think this is good. Shall we recap really quickly before we head out?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm happy with this, except Loial, but
I
actually do think when I look at it, I get
he's in good company now. He's in good company. At S tier, the highly coveted spot, we have put Egwene and Moiraine. Very well earned there. Some of the most interesting moments of these 3 books. Then in the A tier, you have Rand al'Thor, Nynaeve, Mat, Perrin, Min, Elaine, and Tom. I like that. Moving Tom up is good.
Good for Min and Elaine.
Good for Min and Elaine, and honestly, good for Tom too. He squeaked it in. Like to be up there with Mat, Nynaeve, and Rand. Like, come on, that is an honor. So B, we have Lan, Lews Therin, Elias, Loial, Siuan, and Padon Thane, which I'm happy with that too.
Yeah.
C, we have Faile, Lanfear, Tam, Galad, Gawain, and Morghese. That's totally fine with me. And then in the D tier, better luck next time, guys. Balal, Bartholomew, and Ingtar. So the good news is they're all dead. So
what?
They're all dead now, right? So that's the end of it. They probably won't make it into the next tier ranking. I agree. There's just not enough villains in this. Like the villains aren't.
We didn't do it. Was it Ishamael is like what
Ishamael?
Ishamael. Like we didn't put him in the.
You want to throw him in the mix?
I mean, he'd be way better than these other villains. Like he could get a B tier, or even you could push for A. I think.
Can you push for A? I'm happy.
I wouldn't take the time to if you weren't feeling it. I think B is fair for. I
think B is good because again, he's not fleshed out enough, and we want to see more. But for a villain, that's a fantastic showing, and I'm happy with that. So, surprise, sneak in with Ishamael and B. So, all right. There we have it, guys. The definitive Wheel of Time books 1 through 3 character tier list.
For the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast and not for the larger community.
Yes, we are going to share this over on Twitter, and we want to hear your thoughts. I'm curious to see what people think. I think people are going to want to put Rand and Matt higher and maybe Egwene lower. I don't know. Nynaeve lower. Who knows? But this is where we stand. This is what we look for in our characters, and I think we did a really good job representing. Like, we are consistent across all these characters, I think, in how we ranked them.
I feel good looking at it now.
This is worthy of posting on Twitter.
The bar isn't preposterously high for what I post on Twitter, I would say. But this is better than most of what I do. So I think that... No, I'm actually very excited. I hope folks are interested in it. I'm actually super curious to see where people differ from us, and we're always super open to conversation. We're very flexible about these.
Like things, I'm tempted to throw these all kinds of ways. You catch me in the right mood, I could change some of these quite drastically, but at least for now, I think we're in a really great spot. And
I agree.
Thank you to everyone that's stuck with us in the podcast version of a tier list. I hope you enjoyed us talking about the characters and you had a good time following along, and we appreciate you.
Ditto.
All right.
Well said, Charles.
Check it out on Twitter, and unless you have anything else to say, Dylan, I think we're ready for that outro music.
All right. Yeah, the only thing I have to say is let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping.
Well said. Here we go. All right, everybody, thank you for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. This has been your co-hosts, Charles and Dylan, today. If you like what you heard, if you want to see this tier list online and comment on it, share your thoughts, best place to do that's going to be Twitter. That's over at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end. We're also going to be hanging around Facebook and Instagram at the FTF Podcast. You can always shoot us an email at theftfpodcast@gmail.com. And Dylan, if they wanted to further support the show in a way that was super helpful, high engagement, and free to do, and they just happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, what is it that they can do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just click on that Friends Talking Fantasy page on the Apple Podcast app. Scroll down past all those episodes that you're seeing until you start seeing stars. Once you see those stars, clicking 5 of them would be the ideal number if you want to support the show. Writing a review can be even more helpful if you do have the time for that. But just listening, getting to the end of a tier list that you can't even see yet, that is more than enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening, making it all the way to the end. We appreciate you. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.